Welcome to the Take the North podcast. I'm David Haugh, along with Dan Wiederer from the Chicago Tribune, who covers the Bears. We are here. Football season has begun. Day one, reporting day at Halas Hall. Dan, you have been out there all day. You have sat through the press conferences. Anything different or stand out this year from previous years? A lot of optimism elsewhere in Chicago. I imagine that permeates Halas Hall.
There's no question about it. First and foremost, as I got out of my car in the auxiliary lot today and walked across the parking lot of Halas Hall, you feel training camp starting to come to life here. All of the stages are being set up, all of the amenities around the campus here coming to life. And the first practice will be Saturday, and the Bears will charge into that practice, David, with higher expectations, certainly from the outside world, than they've had in probably 5 years. You can feel that. I thought Ryan Poles told a cute little anecdote at the start of his press conference in taking his son to Cooperstown with his travel baseball team. He said there were about 8 other teams from Illinois there in the Chicago area there, and he took a lot of questions from kids there about the status of the Chicago Bears and was happy to do so because for the first time in a long time, people are excited and curious with optimism about this team. And Ryan said that just provides energy to the climb that the Bears are on, and you can feel that energy already.
Let's start there because we heard from Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus, along with Caleb Williams, DJ Moore, and Rome Odunze. Not sure if the list of players stopped there, but those were the most notable. Dan, I always wondered this, and each year we have gone into seasons. Well, maybe not every year, but you wonder. The constant is you wonder the tone that will be set. And this year on this morning on the Mully and Haugh show, I maintained that I wanted to hear from Ryan Poles the acknowledgement that this is a playoff team. This is a playoff roster. Year 3 is winning time. And those are the standards. And that's where the bar is. I don't know that I heard it in those terms, but I want you to explain how close he came from setting that as the goal.
Yeah, it wasn't explicit. It wasn't specific in saying, yes, we believe this is a playoff football team in those exact words. But I do think that there is a vibe inside this building that they can raise the bar from where they've been, particularly in the first 2 years of Ryan and Matt's regime here. And they understand that you have to kind of balance those big picture visions and those goals with an understanding of where you are right now. And the Bears are very aware that they have a rookie quarterback and a new offensive system that has to get off the ground for them to start having a more, I guess, realistic understanding of how high the team can raise the bar for 2024. But there's a pride in the way the roster has been assembled. There is a philosophy here about how the climb is going to occur. And I just think across offense, defense, coaching staff, front office, there's a shared belief that now is the time. Now is the time to attack and strike and go after this thing with some urgency, while still understanding the patience involved in the process. But there's no reason not to believe that this team can be in the postseason. And that's, a realistic and attainable goal for this group. And they have to approach every single day of camp with that in the forefront of their mind so that they can kind of get this thing going as quick as possible.
When you look at the roster, the only area that I think, or the most consistent area that people talk about when things that have not yet been addressed fully, is the end opposite Montez Sweat. Ryan Poles addressed that today. He was asked directly, as everybody expected. Dan, I think he gave the only answer you can give is that he believes in the depth. You don't want to sell out people on your roster who you're going to have to count on. Also, training camp is full of surprises. Who knows if Austin Booker comes out and plays at a high level and is better and further along than you thought once you put the pads on. At the same time, when you're a team this good and you have these kind of aspirations we just discussed, there's always a security with experience, and he'll keep his eyes open. I thought he handled that question about like you would expect.
Well, so important clarification there, because the topic came up first in Ryan Poles' opening statement before we even got to questions. And so it was an acknowledgement right up front that he understands that there is need or room, I guess would be a better way to put it, for growth, and that they will continue to explore street free agency for some talent and depth that can maybe bolster that pass rush a little bit. And Ryan volunteering that up in the outset of his opening address of training camp was telling to me, because it means he is going to stay active. It means he is going to monitor the first several practices that the Bears have to get a better sense of where they're at. I believe the pads will come on for the first time on Saturday, July 27th for this football team. And as you know, that's go time for the linemen, offensive and defensive, to learn where those groups are at. If you're looking at names on that free agency list, you're talking about Yannick Ngakoue, who was here a year ago, still kind of rehabilitating from the broken ankle that ended his season. And then you have Emmanuel Ogba and a handful of others out there. But certainly Ryan was very clear in saying that he was going to continue to explore possibilities and very open to adding pieces there if need be.
One point of clarification, too, to follow up. In Ngakoue, he was asked directly about, and I found it interesting, the Bears trainers and staff were able to lead him through a portion of his rehab up to a certain point. But it sounds like now he has moved away from the Bears people and using a different set of, maybe his own. But does it give them any benefit of knowing where he is or maybe where he isn't?
Well, they're going to have to keep tabs on that for certain for the long haul. And what that means is just kind of being in close contact as needed to figure that out. As they figure those things out, it'll be up to them to gauge the status of Yannick Ngakoue and then to figure out which direction it needs to go.
When you talk about the offensive line, in terms what it will look like on day one, do you have an idea? Did you get a sense of that? And how do you think that Poles handled questions about where the offensive line is as training camp begins?
Yeah, I mean, look, that's a position group where you're seeking cohesion and you're seeking the best five. And I think there's been an acknowledgement here that they have to continue to work through that, David, and figure out what direction they can go. I think they feel comfortable that they have added pieces to create talent and depth, that can allow them to be versatile and allow them to withstand some injury issues and some things that go sideways on them. And so in that regard, it's going to be very interesting to just see how training camp evolves, because you know as well as I do that there's always an injury. There's always a thing or two that goes sideways on you, and you have to be ready to pivot. But I think at the outset, Ryan feels very comfortable with some of the guys that they've brought in.
A quick timeout to pivot about how you're pivoting. You just passed the beat writers agility drill on day one of training camp very, very skillfully without anybody really noticing, unless they're watching the YouTube feed. They would not have noticed that you just changed positions. You did it seamlessly and you did it mid-answer.
Well, so I'm here now. If you noticed my background there, I was sitting on the dais that all of the aforementioned speakers today were using, and there's a crew in here that looks like they're ready to replace the two-man platform with a single standing podium that they do up here and sometimes. And I think I was in the way, so I'm trying to slide to the side so they can continue to get on with their duties and go about their day unobstructed. And so that was what, if you saw me moving around, that was the the reason for that.
Is that more or less likely to get you on an episode of Hard Knocks?
Well, the Hard Knocks crew is not in here right now, and so I that will not be televised.
Have they been?
They were here. They were here. They were here with a heavy presence in the introductory press conferences today. And with that, David, I think you're going to be really curious to see how these episodes unfold coming forth, because those cameras were everywhere, the boom mics were everywhere, and you mentioned the people that spoke. That also included Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards today. They've got some really good representatives of this football team right now, and that's going to help the entertainment value of that Hard Knocks program when it gets started here in a couple of weeks.
I think that'll be fascinating to follow in terms of what the Bears approve getting out, what they are uncomfortable getting out, how that flow of information is handled, because they're used to dealing with the Bears media, but they're not used to dealing with it becoming the information and what's going on a TV show. And there's a big difference. Just ask Joe Shane of the Giants just how different things can be once you let those cameras into your office and let you record and chronicle how you do your job.
I still have to catch up on some of those Giants episodes of Hard Knocks from the offseason edition there to kind of get a feel. It feels like from things I've seen on social media that there's been plenty of Bears crossover with footage of Caleb, footage of Rome Odunze, some Malik Neighbors conversation that's been ongoing. And so look, like it's going to be must-watch TV for Bears fans when the Bears episodes occur. And yeah, it'll be fun to kind of see how that goes.
The Giants series has been fascinating and enlightening, and also in the way that it makes you understand why the Bears might have resisted so long being in the midst of that or having those cameras everywhere, because of the information and the conversations that the public becomes privy to that you might not want to be out there. And so I think it's more than just trade secrets. It's just how you do your job and what that means, and people can form perceptions that might be incomplete and unfair. And I think that's an interesting thing. Let's get back to Ryan Poles.
Yeah.
So I want to know what you thought of how he described the contract negotiations with Caleb Williams, because they did go longer than people anticipated. Caleb Williams described being at 12 at night, both nights. And there were reports from Pro Football Talk about wanting to be an LLC, so you're not taxed, asking for an extra, not being franchised, different things that just aren't really part of NFL contracts. But I think that both Ryan Poles and Caleb Williams, when he spoke, described or depicted a process that seemed somewhat conventional. I just wonder if it was because he wasn't using an agent, if some of these questions maybe stood out more because you're dealing with people who haven't dealt with NFL contracts before.
It's hard to say. Both Ryan and Caleb downplayed the topic as a whole, and sort of indicated that there was no sort of animosity involved in the back and forth. It's a contract negotiation. There's going to be things, as Ryan said, that are asked for early in the process. There are going to be things that are explained on why they can't be included in a contract. Caleb's a rookie. He's got an unconventional approach without an NFLPA certified agent, without that representation. He has to lean on some other people to help guide the process for him. And so that creates some obstacles to steer around. And so I think for Caleb's purposes, it's done. As he said today, the ink is dried and we're on to the next thing. I think Ryan felt the same way. Certainly some interesting nuggets about the process that have kind of been shared by Pro Football Talk throughout the process. But I think the Bears are ready to take this quarterback, who they drafted #1 overall, and dive into the next 4 years, the 4 years that he's under contract with the Bears with that 5th-year option, and ready to kind of turn the page on it, understanding that this was probably just, I guess, an initiation process for the young quarterback.
I agree with that. I really don't care what he asked for after he signed the contract. That's the focus, is that he is here on time, did not miss a minute of practice time or meeting time or any time. I did find it interesting that Ryan Poles reminded everybody of the Roquan Smith experience, because that was something that you look at. He introduced that as a thing when things can go a little bit amiss, and you wonder about why. I wondered, Roquan Smith as a Bear is not a tenure that you necessarily want to recall fondly if you're the general manager, because Ryan Poles wasn't here when he had the contract holdout as a rookie, but he was here when they had the consternation and problems with the contract renegotiation or the extension that ended up with Roquan Smith being traded. So I wonder why he brought that up. But again, that's probably splitting hairs, and it's not a major thing, but it did make you think that you're grateful, if you're a Bears fan, that Caleb Williams got through any minutia and signed the contract. The same with Rome Odunze.
And he'll have his first training camp practice on Saturday, and then begins the process of trying to get ready to play winning football as soon as possible for this team. And I think you hear that from Caleb. I think you hear that from his teammates, that there's this need to have urgency. Cole Kmet and DJ Moore were both asked what the realistic timeline is for this offense to start clicking. DJ Moore said tomorrow, and Cole Kmet said now. And so it gives you an indication of where the veteran mindsets are at in terms of, I think Cole's words are, there's no time to meander through this thing. We've got to get ready to play winning football as soon as humanly possible. And with that, you dive into the first practice with the hope that the rookie quarterback can progress quickly. Caleb, I think, has been incredibly insightful and introspective in his own growth, in talking about the need to kind of push his perfectionist tendencies to the background when he has rough days, and understand where he is in the process. The passion and drive that he has is a total plus until it's a negative. And so he's got to control that throughout this process. Matt Eberflus has given him sort of that bite-sized approach to things, saying we're going to take practice stacks. So the Bears will have 4 practices here, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, before they get an off day on Wednesday, and they're going to view that as a stack of practices. Well, then the stack of practices beyond that have to be better than that. And as we go through July and August, you need to see progress, stack to stack to stack to stack. And I think that's a good way for a young player to look at it, while understanding that in the back of his mind, he not only wants to lead the Bears to the playoffs this season, he wants to be one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the sport. And so, balancing those two things, that big picture ambition with the daily immersion in the growth process, is a big deal for Caleb. And I think he has the maturity to handle that. But obviously, as you know, as the spotlight turns up, as the intensity of camp turns up, that gets harder and harder to do. And there are going to be some rough days out here. I promise you, we'll be on this podcast going, Caleb and the offense looks crappy today. And what does it mean? And then we'll be trying to draw conclusions from it. But hopefully he's got the sort of poise to navigate all that.
That's why it is incumbent upon us to remind everybody, as a public service announcement to Bears fans everywhere, this is late July. The Bears don't play a game that matters until early September. There's a long time between then and now, and they do practice for a reason, and he is a rookie. There's going to be reports about Caleb Williams was not sharp, and the defense are dominating. All those things. The defense should be ahead of the offense every single year, regardless of the quarterback. So I think there's almost like, whether we're talking to ourselves or we're talking to the masses, Dan, the need to avoid overreaction is one that you have to remember each and every July and August.
I promised you, right, like recently
Yeah.
on the show, that I was going to take a walk after every
Yeah,
practice, just
right.
to make sure I didn't overreact, and to take that deep breath, exhale, and to make sure that we're putting everything within the proper frame and interpreting everything correctly. It's going to be interesting. First of all, let me just say this: that when Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze took the stage together today, there were two things that I thought were kind of notable. Number one, obviously more of the questions were directed toward Caleb Williams. He's going to be the center of attention for a long time. And there was a point late after Caleb took like 6 or 7 questions in a row where a question was asked to Rome, and he said, "Let me take this one, bro. Don't butt in here." And it was just kind of a joking way of saying, like, "Look, I get that you're the star of the show, but there's other people here too," and it was a cool kind of needling moment. But Caleb also shared that during the spring, throughout OTAs and minicamp, that he and Keenan Allen were residents of the same hotel, as they were both acclimating to Chicago together. And so there were nights and evenings where they were able to, play cards and then go over plays. And you've got this long in the tooth veteran with a ton of skins on the wall, able to help this ambitious young rookie with a ton of talent learn about the NFL game. And so there's little moments like that give you greater confidence in what the Bears have put around Caleb Williams and in the support that they've given him, and Caleb's appreciation for the support that he does have, both from a playmaking standpoint and from a place to learn. Cole Kmet vocalized, he's a rookie in 2020. He comes in this building and he's got Jimmy Graham to lean on, and so you have that, like, okay, like, it's getting a little bit overwhelming on certain days. I'm not up to speed with where I want to be. How do I navigate this? And Jimmy Graham was one of those guys. Well, Caleb's got a bunch of those guys now, particularly in that offensive huddle, where he can lean to try to navigate some of this. And I think that's going to be fun for him and probably pretty rewarding for the organization as a whole.
I also thought it was cool to hear DJ Moore, who has caught passes from a lot of different quarterbacks, talk about and praise and rave about the arm talent that is obvious to us, but when you hear it from a DJ Moore, it resonates a little bit louder. And he wondered, like the rest of us, what it's going to look like, and he can't wait to see what it is like when he's being chased by defenders in pads and when it's full contact. And I think that's the question. I think we can talk about a lot of things with Caleb Williams, and they're all true, but one of the biggest is going to be how he handles pressure.
Yeah.
How he handles the pocket breaking down, whether he escapes, whether he knows where to throw, whether he's rushed into making a throw before he's ready. Because frankly, that is the one thing that's difficult to simulate. He did not face much at USC. When you look at you break down the numbers and you just watch the tape, he wasn't under the kind of pressure that he could face on a weekly basis in the NFL.
Right. And then there's the other kind of pressure too, which is the pressure to live up to expectations, which have gotten pretty weighty and lofty pretty quickly. But I think you're right. As we get deeper into camp, as those competitive periods continue to unfold, the Bears have been pretty forward in saying that they want Caleb Williams to take a lot of reps in training camp against the number one defense. A lot of times in camp, you'll see the one offense go against the two defense and the one defense go against the two offense. Well, the Bears are going to go ones against ones in Matt Eberflus's philosophy in this camp. And I think it's part of a vote of confidence in Caleb Williams, and it's part of a way of challenging him to get up to speed as quickly as possible. That's going to be awesome to watch, to be here every single day and see how he handles that pressure, the real pressure, obviously, without anyone able to put him on the ground. You're going to get a feel day by day on how he's navigating. Look, like you remember hearing me in 2022, I guess it was, talk about TAR, tuck and runs with Justin Fields. And that only came up because for 3 weeks of camp, there were periods where Justin wasn't finding things open and he was quickly tucking and running. And it became a thing like, oh, we better keep an eye on this in the weeks and months and years to come. If the quarterback sort of develops a habit of feeling pressure, escaping with his legs, and not having the ability to threaten defense with his arm, Caleb is a different player, obviously, but you're going to want to see what his, I guess, defense mechanisms are when he's rushed and the ways he finds to work around the pressure that he faces.
And interestingly, maybe who he finds when he's in trouble. Who's that guy that he feels comfortable going to? Who's that guy who tends to always get open? He's got a lot of choices.
Which is great, right? Yeah, there is a lot of choices. And I think those guys feel really collectively confident that they can help him in that way.
So you mentioned Eberflus. Let's talk about Flusy for a second. I thought it was whether he was talking about bod pods or leveling up or all the things. He sounded like the football coachiest of coaches again. And it was almost it's his third go around now. I felt like he had a good moment when I think there was a general question to the podium. He's sitting next to Ryan Poles and he says, "I got this one. Let me take this one." And I just imagined like 2 years ago, I can imagine the guy, Matt Eberflus, stepping forward to answer anything, just hoping nobody asks him. He's like the kid who doesn't want to be called on in class. Last year, he might have been a little bit clumsier. This may mean nothing, but Dan, I think we have seen the evolution of Matt Eberflus, the slight evolution of Matt Eberflus in this offseason, from getting his own PR help, and paying for a little bit of maybe reputation polishing, to listening to his wife and having his own personal style adjusted, to the thing just feeling more comfortable in his role as defensive signal caller and in the third year on the job. Today, I think you did see a coach who came across as more comfortable, more confident. I don't know if it means anything on Sunday, but it was at least less cringy.
It's funny that you bring up that exchange, because before I came in this room to sit down and record, we were joking in the media room, Mark Potash, Colleen Kane, Caitlin Kaler, and I, about that specific moment. I believe it was a question about Caleb Williams. And as you said, Matt kind of pushed Ryan aside and said, "I'll handle this one." Yep. And Mark Potsy was saying, "Look, like that's a sign that Flus is a chain in command." And I retorted in a very Potsy-esque fashion and said, "I don't know. That seems like it's the first indications of a power struggle between Ryan and Matt." So depends on how you want to spin it here coming out of this. But no, I do think Matt understands that he has to continue to grow as a head coach, and part of that is making sure that you're in command of everything and expressing that authority and doing so in a commanding and confident way that gives everyone confidence in where you're headed. He's got a lot at stake here. Look, I had a conversation earlier today about whether this is a win or else year for Matt Eberflus. Nothing inside the building right now indicates that. A lot of things outside of Halas Hall around the league presents curiosity on what happens if this doesn't go the way everyone here expects it to. What happens if they do struggle? What happens if the quarterback isn't progressing? Does that narrative change as the season goes along? We got a long way before we have to entertain those discussions realistically, but I do think that there is a little bit of a different outlook internally here at Halas Hall than there is in the rest of the NFL, because I know there are folks elsewhere in the league that are saying, man, like there is nothing to tell you, concrete, hard evidence that tells you Matt Eberflus is going to be the coach for the next 4 years. And yet inside the building, they're obviously operating with that assumption that he's going to be along for the ride, which everyone expects Caleb Williams to be the key to unlocking.
Well, I think that the fact that he was there today is a big statement about what you just said. They believe he will be here. They believe he is the guy. If they didn't, understanding what was about to come and all the changes that were about to happen with a team that finished 7-10, but with the arrow pointing up, with the number one pick and all the things that they executed successfully. They had to have believed in Matt Eberflus a great deal to invest that kind of hope, knowing what the resources were going to be. So
And
that was
they
a big
starting first
step,
and
and you're
foremost with
exactly
Ryan Poles,
right.
right?
Yeah, right, exactly. No doubt about it. Speaking of polls, back to him for a second before we get to some of the details before we get out of here. I have not read the book that he recommended all his staff read.
Wisdom of a
Do you know?
bullfrog.
Have you? Yes, and is that a Navy SEALs account? What's behind the book, and what was he looking for?
It's Admiral William McRaven wrote the book. I have not read it. It was Ryan's entry point into talking about the sort of philosophical approach that this team is going to have in 2024. He talked about the only easy day being yesterday. We were still, as of 15 minutes ago in the media room, trying to interpret what that means. Do you have any guess on what it means to say the only easy day was yesterday?
Hmm. No.
And Ryan just really then went on to stress that the foundation of what they've built here during the 2+ years that him and Matt have been together is built on character and passion and stamina. And he talked about having a locker room full of guys that are resilient and coachable, and have grit, and having a constant intentional effort at developing all those traits in a way that makes you a better football team. Now, there's a lot of really cool stuff that makes post-its that you could put on your mirror or things that you could have in a social media meme. Somehow it's got to translate into wins on Sundays and Mondays and Thursdays on the football field, or it's just kind of fluffy mumbo jumbo. Ryan Pace rather recommended books every year, and we documented several of those over the years, and ultimately it wasn't enough to get the Bears a single playoff victory. And so ultimately those things have to translate. But I do appreciate Ryan Poles' perspective, big picture, in terms of what he's trying to create here. I do think that they've had a lot of success in sticking to the plan, even through some turbulent times here over the last 2+ years. And I think now they feel like they're at a point to really, I think maybe it was Flus today that said it's go time. That it's time to really take off now. And so now they've got to take every book and podcast and anything else they've read or listened to and apply it to being a really good football team through the summer and be ready for week 1 in September.
All valid, all good points, and it's all the kind of thing you do here on the first day of training camp when you're trying to establish a culture, reestablish a culture, and reinforce some ideals about that culture and what your mission statement is. But let's face it, the most important book the Bears are going to read or distribute or take part in this season is the Shane Waldron playbook. You know, titled to later. We'll figure out what we want to call that and how much stock you want to put in all those offensive changes that are coming along the way. I thought that was a pretty good moment, though. The other thing I thought stood out to me, kind of along the same lines. Matt Eberflus talked about that the youth and experience, a good mix. And he's right. The Bears have a nice blend. It is winning time. It is year 3. I also think that he went out of his way, like a lot of coaches do. But this resonates because the Bears have done this intentionally. This is a pretty high character locker room.
Yeah.
And after last year's missteps with the coaching staff and a lot of things that were, questioning about the culture and the Justin Fields saying, coaching and Matt, all the things that they went through that were symptoms of a dysfunctional group and organization. I think they've done a nice job of cleaning things up going into this season where they have to feel pretty good about the collection of character that they put in that locker room and on that
Yeah.
coaching staff.
Well, I think it was really evident today in the, really the 6 players that they brought in front of the media. Again, it's 2 rookies, 2 top 10 picks in Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, but then it's DJ Moore and Cole Kmet. It's TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds. And you listen to those guys speak, you understand the experience that those guys have. The wiring of each of those individuals, and you say, man, that's just a small sampling of the character and the passion and sort of the grit that Ryan's looking for. It was really a fun back and forth with everyone today, and you sense that there's something very real building here, and that's not to be taken for granted. I'll give you one other little nugget from the Edwards Edmonds portion of the program today that was notable. I asked Tremaine specifically, with as high as the hopes are for the 2024 Bears defense, what he felt was accomplished down the stretch of 2023 that carries forward, and he was very quick to say belief. that last year there were some new pieces and some new things being worked out, and there was a lot of questions, more curious, like how good can we be, and now it's how good can we be, with a more confident edge. And so I think that belief breakthrough occurred for this defense last year, and to hear those two linebackers kind of vocalize that, and to hear them express the confident edge that this defense carries into training camp, it gives you that sense that you'd want to have if you're in that locker room of, oh yeah, let's go. Like we've got everything it takes to be really, really good. Now we just have to apply it and be really, really good. And so that's fun when you get to be a part of a team. And don't forget, Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, both part of programs respectively in Buffalo and Philadelphia, that built into championship contenders. And so they've experienced this before. Really good perspective to hear from those guys on feeling like this team is nearing that, particularly defensively.
Last couple nuggets before we get out of here. Karan Amagaji was on the non-football injury list. Also, Gerald Everett was added to that as well. That was a little bit of a surprise. Any reasons for concern in anybody else, Dan?
Yeah, Amagaji was expected. He's still rehabilitating from the quadriceps surgery he had last October. So it's been a while now. The Bears are hopeful that sometime here in camp he'll be able to be taken off that NFI list. Gerald Everett was a little bit of a surprise as of the recording of this podcast. We don't know the body part or the reason that he will not be available in the short term. Presumably for Saturday's first practice. We'll see where that heads. Nothing else yet. The Bears are continuing to go through, as you mentioned, conditioning testing and some of that body composition testing and all the things that happen on reporting day. So there may be another surprise or two before nightfall or before the first practice on Saturday, but that's it from an injury standpoint. The only other real notable thing for me is that you heard a reiteration from Matt Eberflus today about preseason reps for the offense. Again, gave you a ballpark number of 45 to 55 snaps for Caleb Williams. It's hard to know who's going to be on the field with Caleb Williams for those 45 to 55 snaps. And Flus obviously said those plans are fluid based on the health of your offensive line. Obviously, if you're going to put your prized quarterback out there, you want your fully intact starting offensive line to be with him. But both Cole Kmet and DJ Moore kind of expressed some of their own reservations about preseason game reps are fun and all, but like if we didn't have to do them, we wouldn't be opposed to not doing them. And so they're going to have to find that right balance, David, in navigating these 4 preseason games, getting the offense off the ground, getting the rookie quarterback off the ground without sort of overdoing it, particularly with guys like those two and Keenan Allen and several others who would probably prefer to take a different runway to the regular season, to put it bluntly.
It'll give us plenty to talk about, and now we have plenty to say. The season is here. We've been waiting a long time to get this started, and Haugh was the place to be today. We'll be back next week with anything that happens. If there's any breaking news over the weekend, certainly we'll react to it. I think no news.
What do you mean breaking news? Every single pass that Caleb Williams throws will be breaking news. So we'll be reacting period by period. No. Every single 7-on-7 period we'll have an emergency podcast.
You're going to be taking a walk. You cannot do any podcasts when you're taking your laps around the Hall grounds. So
maybe one of these episodes we'll do just specifically while I'm taking my walk.
That would be good. Be a good way to do it. We know how agile you can be while you're taping now, so we understand that you can do it. You can walk and talk at the same time. That's skill and coordination. So that wraps it up for the first day of the 2024 football season at Hall. The Bears have reported the Caleb Williams era is underway. It's going to be a ton of fun this year. One more thing from Dan before we go.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that for those who are watching this episode on YouTube, I think Hard Knocks actually missed a moment here of watching that agility and nimbleness that I showed, and then watching this crew. I don't know if you heard some of the drills going and the screwdrivers going while we were recording, but that the 2-person dais has been replaced by the 1-person podium, and so I'm sitting here staring at this, and I mean, my God,
it's adversity.
Hard Knocks did not have their people positioned properly to capture some of the greatest behind the scenes footage of what happens here at Haugh.
Next episode, now that they heard that how agile you are when you're being when you're on camera and wearing a headset, they're going to follow you around, and that'll be fun. You and Tori Taylor are going to be the breakout stars of Hard Knocks. How about that?
Can't wait. It's going to be great to finally have that national breakthrough.
For Dan Wiederer at Haugh, Adam Stasinski, our producer, I'm David Haugh. Thank you for listening to the Take the North podcast.
Great talk. See you out there.
Wrap us up.